And we're live.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Human Mookers. We're really glad you're here tonight, and we have a very special guest with us, Dr. Rena Palloff, who is author extraordinaire and expert all about online learning communities. And we also have Whitney with us too. And Whitney's, are you holding up? Did you hold up the books yet?
Oh, do I need to hold up my books with all my sticky notes? I'm a huge fan, so much so that I even had to, I think, run Dr. Palloff down one time and just so I could get an autograph. So yeah, I'm old school, so I put sticky notes and everything. So if you want to know what page number something is, I can tell you.
So Dr. Palloff is an expert in lots of different areas, including human development in context, learning communities, let's see, online teaching and learning, faculty training, assessment, collaboration, you name it, online, she's been there doing it. So we're really glad to have her here tonight.
Yeah, thanks for being here with us. We're really, really glad to get to talk to you tonight.
Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, do you mind, Robin, if I ask the first question? Because you know I've been dying to for, like a good 20 minutes now. So when you get started talking about how we build community online, I've heard lots of different stories about really kind of group formation and the power of instructor presence at the beginning, and we've talked to some folks who said that kind of tapers off. But maybe you can tell us kind of the transition or the blend of instructor presence and social presence that it takes to form community.
It takes very intentional involvement to form community at the very beginning of a class. So it's really about setting the stage by, well, right now I'm teaching a class on building learning communities in online environments for another university, and one of the things that a couple of people commented on, which is a comment that I get quite often, is that just the way that I introduced myself and the way that I set expectations for the class showed that I'm a human being and that I have a sense of humor, and that I brought my dog is in the room right now with us. I mean, my family, my dog is sort of part of the process. So it's like I'm bringing my students into my own community, my own family, and that just helps to set the stage. So I'm also then encouraging people to do the same by introducing themselves in very personal kinds of ways. And it was interesting to have one student comment that she's never been in an online class where that's happened before. So I think people have sort of a theoretical concept of how to build community online, but when it comes to actually doing it, people don't necessarily jump in with both feet and feel comfortable really exposing who they are to people they don't know. But it's part of what's really important in terms of getting in there and beginning that formation. In addition, using things like icebreaker activities that encourage people to do that. So things like, what's one thing you wouldn't know about me by looking at me or reading my bio, so that people get into some of the more unusual things about themselves so that they can make those connections. I agree that instructor presence sort of decreases or fades into the background as the class goes on, but it shouldn't go away completely. And there always have to be ways, instructors always have to be looking for ways to jump in to connect people with one another as the class progresses.
Well, we certainly experienced some challenges of our own in the online classes that we've taken before, both Whitney and I as students ourselves, and then learn from that, and then also try to put those things into our own courses. I know that you have some techniques that you use that you talk about in some of your publications, like dyads and teams. Can you tell us some other things that you do to kind of keep that community going once the instructor has shown themselves and as humans, what can you do to keep that feeling going?
Well, again, you have to look for places where you can interject some of that. So if I see a conversation waning, I jump in and ask another question to engage people. I might, if I feel like people are not necessarily connecting on a human-to-human basis, throw in another icebreaker activity. I always have a cafe area going in the class where people can talk about the social stuff that that they want to be able to talk about. So for those of us in the U.S. right now, of course, March Madness is happening, and I'm a huge college basketball fan, and so I'll talk about that and try to get people excited about talking about college basketball, or whatever sport they're interested in, or anything like that. Throwing in conversations about movies or what we've done this past weekend, keeping that going in that cafe area so that they interact with one another as people. And that's important throughout the entire course.
Is that a space that you, as the instructor, stay out of? Because I've seen it done a couple of different ways, or because some folks set up like a virtual water cooler or something where it's a student-only kind of space. How do you manage that?
I'm in there. I don't make it a student-only kind of space. That doesn't mean that I'm dominating the conversation there, but again, if I see that they're not really utilizing that space, or if I'm wanting them to do a better job of connecting with one another, I'll jump in there and post something. So I don't stay out of it, but I don't see it as kind of as an area that I have to facilitate. I expect students to sort of facilitate that piece for themselves.
Yeah. So one more question, and then I promise I'll give you a turn, Robin. In the Human MOOC, we've been taking a look at the affordances of video, not always synchronous, but also asynchronous video, to increase the presence in online learning. And so I wondered if you could just kind of share some of your experiences with that.
I think it's got positive and negative kinds of connotations and uses. There are some people, first of all, if it's going to be just a boring talking head video, that's not very useful. I mean, there are other ways of incorporating video that are much more active and engaging. So, for example, I have a course that I teach on group process, and I don't necessarily record myself, but I use little snippets of video of groups interacting with one another and embed those in the course. So I use Monty Python a lot, and I use other kinds of, funny videos so that people get the sense of what the topic is about without having to see my little head on the screen and hear my voice. The other issue with video a lot is that most of the ones that I've seen have been very poorly produced, and so it's really difficult to see this really scratchy video that's hard to hear and hard to watch, and that's not going to engage students. I think what I've found that some students seem to really like is even just having a photo of the instructor with audio. It doesn't have to be full video. And a lot of times, too, people are very uncomfortable in front of the camera. I mean, just being online with my face showing up, it's like, okay, I got to check my hair. And, it's really, you get uncomfortable in front of the camera. Not everybody has presence in front of a camera, and so if it's this wooden, and I've seen some horrific video, that's been embedded in courses, and I was embarrassed for the person who created it, thinking they were doing this really good thing. So I think you have to be judicious about the way that you use it, and just having video doesn't create presence. It has to be engaging, and that's much more difficult to do. And also, people don't always have the resources available to create well-produced, engaging video. So I don't use it very much.
I love that you mentioned the photo with audio as an option. That's one that I'll suggest to the faculty that I work with, especially the ones who are uncomfortable in front of the camera or self-conscious or something like that. One of the things that's come up in some of the classes that we've taught for the Canvas Network are all of the different cultures that are coming together in these large classes, people from all over the world. And I just wondered, had you come across anything in your research or your writing that kind of addresses how you, I don't want to say neutralize, but how do you create a community that can kind of envelop all those different cultures that people have and ways of communicating? It's really hard to do online.
It's hard to do in person. I used to teach in Asia, and face-to-face in Asia, and where the instructor, the professor, is considered next to God, and trying to get these guys to ask me a question was like pulling teeth. So what I found, and actually the program that I was working with, the university I was working with, one of the things that we discovered is that we had to sort of intentionally create some group activities where they had to talk to one another. And so again, using small group work, using icebreaker type activities that are fun and engaging is one way to get them to talk to one another, so that there's not so much reliance on the professor as sort of the central focus of knowledge. And then just sort of encouraging. And I remember the first time that someone actually asked me a question in class, and I was ecstatic, and I applauded and sort of went crazy because they asked me a question. And it was done in jest, and I was certainly not making fun of the person. It was a good question. I was just very excited that that person got to the point where they could move beyond, this notion of the instructor as God, and ask a question. So, but I'm also very respectful of the culture and know that that is a concern, that is an issue. And so I try to encourage and empower, and hope that they will start working with one another and not just depend on me.
Well, and you bring up a really good point. So we actually had a question from Carlos Antonio, and for anyone who might be watching, it looks like we've got some folks tuned in and watching right now. Carlos is using the Q&A function, and he dropped in a question that said, in Asia and the Middle East, learners regard the teacher as the source of all knowledge. Right. Consequently, they do not regard each other as possible sources of learning. How would you try to overcome this barrier to communities of practice? And I think your mentioning of kind of almost forcing the issue. I mean, creating the small groups, encouraging them to do some icebreakers, getting them talking to each other seems to really be the magic trick, and that's encouraging and empowering, just like you said.
Yep.
Yeah. So thanks, Carlos, for your question.
Thank you, Carlos.
Yeah. We have a couple more questions, but I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, Robin, if you have one more.
The only thing I was going to ask is, inevitably, when working with new faculty members, and this is on my mind right now because actually Whitney's helping me create a new course for first-time teachers, not necessarily online teachers, but first-time teachers, But I've noticed in online that the default is the discussion board. And, try as hard as we can. I'm at a loss sometimes how to kind of wean them off that as ways of interacting. Do you have any any magic tricks you can share with us?
Wean them off the discussion board?
Yeah, as the only method of interaction. A lot of times they'll default to that, and it'll be every week there's a discussion, and you have to answer 3 people, and it's the same formula every week, and then the same person answers first and answers the question completely, and so everyone's not really being effective in their answers.
Well, I think a couple of things. One is I think the discussion board is the heart and soul of an online course. So I'm not going to try to wean people off of the discussion board. But what I would suggest is that they be encouraged to use the discussion board more effectively. And so, asking a question that is going to involve, well, give me a list of 3 things or tell me 3 things, and then they answer that, one student answers that, and there's nothing left for other students to answer, that's a poor question. So it's really about the way they form discussion questions that are more open-ended and encourage engagement and involvement between students, and also then teaching students how to provide good feedback to one another is another critical component of that. So I wouldn't wean them off the discussion board. I would just focus on making more effective use. Mm-hmm. So and there are other things that you can do with the discussion board. You can do debates. You can do other sort of a jigsaw kind of thing where each person brings a piece of it. You can rotate facilitation. I use that a lot so that the students are posting the discussion question for the week and then engaging with one another around that question so that it doesn't always come from the instructor. So there are a lot of creative ways to use that discussion board effectively.
Yeah, and I think you hit on it. You've got to be creative in the way you use it. So it's the method more than the tool. And I think, Robin, you may have been the one that taught me this, that you have the students curate information around a topic, so they're bringing information to the discussion forum, which is a really useful strategy to get them bringing current events around some sort of topic or issue into the discussion forum to share with each other.
Yeah, I think if you make the more relevant you make it, the more excited people are going to get about engaging in that conversation. I always try to relate whatever we are doing with something in the world, something going on in the world, so that it doesn't seem like, well, there's this discussion going on over here and all these other world events out there. It's all integrated.
Yeah. Very cool. So are we ready for just a question from Helen DeWard?
Can I ask one more thing real quick? So which one of your books has the most ideas of creative ways to use discussion in it, just for my own information?
I would say either Building Learning Communities or Lessons from the Virtual Classroom.
Okay.
And then also collaborating online, because I put some of that in collaborating online also.
Okay, I guess I'll just have to get all of them.
There you go.
I'll let you borrow this one for a small fee. Just don't move my Post-it notes. So without further ado, Helen, if you're watching, your question's up next. So the next question is, there are several models of community. There's community of inquiry, community of practice, affinity spaces. Are there specific elements from any or all of these models that work best for online communities?
Well, the community of inquiry, one of the things that I did in one of our books was to compare, not affinity necessarily, but COI and our model of community and Collins and Burge's notion of community. There are elements that pervade all of them that are common to all of them. I don't know that there's any that are more important or less important than others. I've certainly followed Randy Garrison's work on COI forever, and he and I have influenced each other. We've spoken together at conferences and communicated with one another. So I think we all sort of come from the same basic notion of creating that space where people can work with, collaborate, and interact together. And I think the COI and communities of practice and all of the models that have been mentioned just sort of take a slightly different slice at it. Randy's models, the COI model, is looking at the forms of presence. Communities of practice obviously are looking at linking around practice and commonalities developed that way. I'm not as familiar with the affinity models, so I can't really comment on that. But it's all sort of different pieces of the same pie, I think. So,
yeah, and I would almost argue that this MOOC, this human MOOC, while we're really focusing on the community of inquiry model, the MOOC itself has become a community of practice where practitioners in the same space, we're all interested in how to be more effective online educators, are sharing their best practices with each other. So we're kind of we're a COP studying COI while trying to build community.
Yeah.
It's the meta MOOC. Oh, goodness. So, Helen, I hope that answered your question. And we have one more from the crowd, and then I promise, Robin, I'll give you an opportunity to close and ask anything you want. But I want to get to Richard. Richard Crease asks, are there content areas or even types of learning communities that are especially suited to online learning?
No. The answer is no. When I first started doing this work, I thought that the social and behavioral sciences were really sort of the owners of the community approach in online learning, but I don't believe that any longer. I mean, I've certainly seen very good use of community-based practices in STEM courses and in pretty much every discipline that you can think of. Again, the notion is bringing people together to work together, to learn together, and from one another. And so that can be done with any content area that you're working with. So no, I don't think it's discipline specific at all.
All right, Richard, you have your answer. So, Robin, I will try to sit on my hands and let you ask the next question.
I just wanted to read you a comment from Dave. He's another one of our facilitators for Human MOOC, and he says the strategy that he likes to use is to have the students end their responses with questions for the class and the instructors. So I think that's a really good strategy too, kind of rather than maybe responding to everyone and ending with a question. And I love what you said about the different disciplines and community. I'm working at a health science center now, and some of the courses that we're building community in. One of them is a midwifery. Let's see if I can say it correctly. Midwifery.
Midwifery, yeah.
Class, and so we're using VoiceThread, and we're doing having them respond like that. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. I don't really have any more questions for you, except I know that you're in Texas and you're going to be doing a presentation at TWU. Where can we see you after that? Are you going to be at the Online Learning Consortium conference, or? I'm not
planning to go to OLC. I have a couple of conferences coming up. One actually very excited about. I'm actually, in a past life, I was a social worker and teaching social work online. Masters in social work programs are now moving online. And there was a lot of resistance to that for a very long period of time. And the first distance learning social work conference is coming up in April in Indianapolis, and I'll be doing a couple of presentations there. And then I'm always at the Distance Teaching and Learning Conference in Madison in August. So that'll be the next one that I'll be going to after that. I don't have plans to go to OLC this year.
All right. So I wonder if, Rena, before we wrap up, because we have a full 4 minutes before we hit the hour, are there 3 simple things that people could take away from this conversation and implement immediately to potentially have better outcomes, better learning communities, or at least better community building?
The first would be to be intentional about community building at the very start of a course. So think about creative ways of engaging students with one another at the very beginning of a course. The second is to figure out ways to humanize the course environment itself. Our learning management systems are not human systems. They're not very human. They're not warm and fuzzy. So figure out some ways to make them more so, to bring more human touches into that environment by adding a water cooler or a cafe, by just rewording things so that they're more engaging. And then the third thing that I would say is don't assume that you can just sort of do this at the beginning and then step back and it will automatically sustain itself throughout the course. You need to continue to pay attention to creative ways of engaging students with one another and engaging yourself with students. And a big part of it is not being so formal in how we view ourselves as instructors. We're people.
I think that's similar to what Dr. Chuck, we had Chuck Severance on last week, and he said, when his cat walks in the room, he introduces everybody to his cat, and keeping it real, drinking coffee, just being yourself instead of trying to be some fake person you think you're supposed to be when you're on camera.
Right. I did a session last week with Susan Manning, and she showed a video. She loves video, and she showed a video of her displaying her new iPod and her Fitbit that her kids had given her, and talking about how she was. It had nothing to do with class. It was all about Susan as a human being, and it was wonderful. So yeah, it is about that. I wish that I could show you my doggie who's been here the whole time. And in fact, I almost did because she was like going after a paw there. I couldn't figure out what that was about.
Well, if you want to know more about humanizing or the human side of online learning, it's page 45 with a pink sticky note. And it is in the Building Online Learning Communities book. And gosh, Rena, this is so much fun. Thank you so much for doing this with Robin and I. We really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it. It was fun. Thanks for the great questions.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. We're going to sign off.